Here I'm going to start working on the second attempt to recreate these trunnions. On my first attempt, using the rototable on the mill, I just had a few problems, just probably some experience issues and how difficult the process was. I ended up with some pretty bad chewing up the surfaces there, a little bit on here too. Just not really sure exactly what I was doing, or I don't even know how I did a lot of that. But this the process probably would work. I'd want to mount things a little bit differently. If I was going to do that again, I probably could do it that way. What I'm going to try this time, though, is a little bit different. I'm going to lay this out, again on the plate. Instead of using the rotary table, I'm going to mount this in a 4-jaw chuck in the lathe, and then I will grind some tools, lay out all of my radiuses into this, and then I will actually cut the depth on the lathe and try turning this, basically doing all facing operations and plunge facing operations. Again, something I've never done before, but it'll be should be fun, something to try. Alright, so I put some layout blue on the part here so I can go ahead and start picking out all of these radiuses. So look, the first one is 2 3/8. Here I can use my little metric conversion calculator. (120 millimeters), 4.72, so about 4 3/4. The final radius got cut off of this particular printout, so let's see if I can dig that up out of here. From that, now I know what I need to actually remove. Utilizing this existing trunnion that I'd already done, I use that to kind of profile this tool here. So it's going to be similar to a cutoff tool. I'll be plunging into the face. So as this is spinning, I'm going to be plunging in this way, hopefully to my depth. Then I'll treat it somewhat like a boring operation to bore out to the right widths. And I'll be doing that on all of these here. And then I don't know if you can see I swoop this away at an angle that matches fairly closely. I don't know how I can really show that on the camera, but yeah, so it'll match close enough where I can get in and cut these. The first thing I'm going to do is see if I can use this to cut off the corners, which will probably be the hardest part anyway because it's going to be an interrupted cut. So I'm going to run over and try doing that now. put in this little mark right here so I know where I need to cut to. There's not enough clearance for this tool to get all the way in here, so I got to go back to my plunge cut and cut it up to this line here. Great thing about these little bandsaws is they give you a nice little seat to sit on here while you're cutting, which is helpful because cutting is really slow. Of course, you gotta be careful not to sit on the switch and turn it off. Bad thing about these little guys is if you're not using it like perfectly straight, they throw the blade real easy. So normally when I'm just doing regular cutoffs, it works really well. But trying to do it in the vertical position where I'm trying to cut a curve like this, it's just going to be a pain. I'm going to spare you guys of that. Well, the blade only popped off about 3 or 4 more times. But got that out now. Now I can take this back to the lathe. I can clean up that saw cut and really just clean up all the rest of these surfaces, and then I'll be able to lay it out and start prepping for the final cutouts. Really making some good progress on here. I've got the male part roughed out, so for here I'm just going to be doing a lot of facing operations to get this sunken into the correct depth. But I've also, not only have I been making a lot of progress, I've been making a lot of chips. I have not made this many chips yet, and they are big, hefty chips coming off with this cutter, this plunge cutter that I've been using. It's actually done really well. Got a little stone that I keep a nice sharp edge on it. It always feels like a pretty decent knife edge. So it cuts in and makes pretty clean chips. I'll go handheld, pull you in and kind of scan around. I'm about to clean everything out because it's actually overflowed the bucket. It's going to be a bad job cleaning this out. Well, I'd like to say this was the first test fit, but I was a little bit too excited and actually tried it before I brought it on camera. So this is the first test fit on camera. And it's nice. So now I still have some basic cleanup to do on both of these. I gotta chamfer all of these very outside edges here. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can get the forejaw either on the outside here or come in from the inside and get those cleaned up. It's more of the same. You know, I've had a lot of video of machining. I'm not going to bother doing that. You've seen chamfers before. You've seen chamfers in this video. I've done all these other edges here, all been chamfered. So off to finish that up. I don't know if you can see the finish on that, but running at that relatively high speed and running about 400 RPM with this carbide tip on an interrupted cut, and there's a little bit of waviness to it, but man, it's shiny and kind of pretty. So I'm sorry the video for this was a little bit discontiguous, and I kind of threw all this stuff together off of what was about 6 hours of video that I had taken while making all of this. All of that video I did probably 4 or 5 months ago, so I kind of forgot what all I had and exactly all of the processes that I wanted to put together. So it ended up being mostly just the machining, and some of it may not even been in perfect order, but there was still some really cool machining being done. So these were the final outlay, or the final product that I was able to get together. They all fit together really nicely, and everything rotates really well. Got the axle shaft and the trunnions. So thanks for joining me on the making of these trunnions. It was actually kind of a fun project, and really kind of drove a little bit of the different machinery that I wanted to bring into the shop. I'd started my shop with a small lathe, and it was actually way too small for doing this. I had the idea of doing it on a Bridgeport, which I'd already purchased at the time, and gave that a try. And then I just decided, I want a bigger lathe. The little Logan, while it was a lot of fun to learn the basics on it, just in my shop, I don't like not having the ability to do something that I want to do. I'd rather have something that was too big, that I'd never actually used the maximum capacity of it, than something that's too small and I need something bigger. So of course I've kind of put a lot of larger than I'd probably ever need items here, but it's always better to have something and not need it than to need something and not have it. And also, I always go by the saying, anything worth doing, it's worth overdoing.